Hey, I'm Shaye Wanner, and you are listening to the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. Whether you are a seasoned rancher or just curious about the cattle world, this podcast dives into the stories, science, and strategies shaping the future of ranching. Let's get started and keep your herd ahead of the herd. Folks, today we are visiting with Patrick Jones from the Noble Research Institute about planning for a profit on the ranch, as well as what accounting mistakes are common on ranches and making that profit picture a little unclear. There will also be some resources shared in the show notes for those of you who want to go more in depth on this topic after the conversation. But with that, let's visit with Patrick. Patrick, well, it is a pleasure to have you on the podcast this morning, and I guess if it's not morning, whenever people are listening to this, I hope you're sure having a good day. But to get started, Patrick, help us get to know you a little better and tell us why you bet on the beef industry.
The beef industry is an industry that's just full of producers that's resilient. Even when they come across tough times, they seem to find a way to get through it. It's just interesting. Even the times that I've been in it, it's just a very interesting industry for me.
Well, and you still are involved in it with your role at the Noble Research Institute. And we're going to be talking about ranch profitability today. So when we look at ranch profitability, how can those producers out there plan for a profit and be proactive instead of reactive with their finances?
Yeah, so we look at planning for profit uniquely or a little different, but we ask them to set a goal. And that goal can be anything from a certain amount of money they want to make in a year or a certain percentage of return that they want. And we set that goal, then we'll manage our expenses to reach that goal.
So with that, are those goals that you're helping producers set, is that tied just to a year? Do you look out farther at 3, 5, or even 10-year goals? I know 10 can be hard because it's hard to imagine sometimes, but when you're helping producers set those goals or asking them to do that, what is the time frame on that?
On the profitability side, it's usually a year, but we do have budgeting periods. So if you're doing, let's say, like a stocker operation and you're turning over several sets, we might have several budgeting periods throughout the year. So we set that goal at each budgeting period.
So setting a goal is obviously the initial part of planning for anything. And when we're looking at planning for a profit, what other factors go into creating that plan so that producers stay on track? Because anyone can set a goal, but if you don't have some sort of an action plan or way to check yourself and make sure you're going in the right direction, it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, once we have our profitability goal and we're reasonable about it, we don't want to set a goal that we can't attain. We'll use a profit and loss budget and a cash flow budget to help us reach that goal. The biggest thing about it is we want to make sure that it's reasonable. We don't want to set a goal that we can't attain. So even if you set a percentage, we set a percentage that's obtainable.
So when it comes to setting reasonable goals, can you talk a little bit more about what goes into that as ranchers? Because I think about my own goals for the farm and ranch that my husband have, and we have some big dreams, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be attainable in the short run.
Our profitability goals is on a year at the longest, but we do see people that has long-term goals. They want to expand or they want to reach a higher goal, but we got to start at a year. We got to start to something that we can work forward to. And then those budgets, we create those budgets and we keep working them year after year to keep meeting your short-term and your long-term goals.
So when you're working with producers who are making these changes, once they've gone through the process and have dove into those finances and made a plan and set those reasonable goals and kind of get on the other side of it where they are more profitable or working towards that, what are some of the changes you see in their demeanor or how they act as operators? Just what are some of those maybe secondary positive benefits outside of just being profitable?
No, hopefully we see excitement. I mean, we see a lot of producers that think they're profitable that they're not. They're subsidized with an outside income. They've inherited money, and they've been going on for years thinking they're profitable, but they're really not. So once they set that goal and we start working towards it, we actually get them to a profitable enterprise.
So I think that's a good place to transition. You said there's a lot of producers who think they're profitable, but they're not. What is causing that gap, or what is stealing away from that profit that they're not recognizing?
A lot of it's inherited wealth. That's a big one. Or they own land and they're not charging themselves for that land. So they've inherited a large ranch and we're not charging the enterprise a fair market value to actually analyze that enterprise. And then also off the farm income. That's probably the biggest one. People are subsidizing their ranches with off the farm income.
That's a really common one, that off the farm income, especially for young producers who are just getting started. So, where do you find the balance with that, where maybe it is used as a little bit of a starting point to get your feet off the ground, but maybe it's turned into a crutch instead of not relying on it anymore? How do you help producers with that?
That's what we want to do is prevent it from being a crutch. In my opinion, to be sustainable, we got to get it profitable. We want each enterprise to be profitable on its own. So your ranching enterprise will be its own enterprise and profitable, and we don't have to subsidize it. When we're handing it down to the next generation, I personally don't want to give them something that's just a workhouse that's not profitable. I don't want them to have to subsidize it.
So, outside of that, what are some maybe individual buckets or factors that you really focus on, either in your courses or one-to-one with producers, to help them just be more profitable, since that's really what we're talking about today?
We have two buckets of cost or expenses, overhead cost and direct cost. The overhead cost seems to be the big bucket.
So, how do you define an overhead cost, just to make sure everyone's on the same page with the conversation?
So overhead cost is cost that does not change as units of production change. That'd be your land, your labor, machinery and equipment. All that fall into overhead costs, but they do not change as unit as production changes.
So then what is the accounting mistake that ranchers make with overhead costs?
We're probably not capturing all of them. One cost that surprises me, but like on older equipment, we don't capture the true maintenance cost on them. We see some people that think, well, I've got it paid for, so I don't have any cost associated with it. And there's some real cost in older equipment.
Is there anything else that outside of older equipment that you want to bring light to?
There's some opportunity costs that people don't capture, unpaid labor. We hear a lot of people working for free. I mean, I don't want you to work on your ranch for free. I don't want you to be in the industry for free, but we call it unpaid labor. That's not very common for people to capture. They think their labor's free.
I hate to say it, but that might be the majority of people are not accounting for their own labor when it comes to their ranch. And I think that's a generational thing, is we're just taught to work and work hard, and we get whatever's left and not account for that.
We all do it. We work for free and we get to the end of the year and we run our numbers and hope we made a profit.
Patrick, I know that you've just given a broad overview of overhead costs and given a few examples, but I know that it's much more complex than that and there's more to it. So would you mind taking the time just to break that down a little farther and to go into more detail on that topic?
Yeah, so we break down our overhead costs into four major buckets, we could call them, or categories. We've got land, labor, machinery and equipment, and other. And when we look at land, that also captures your opportunity rent, which opportunity rent is for people that owns land. We charge the enterprises a fee to be on that land. We use whatever lease land costs are. There'll be some other ones, like if you're doing maintenance on roads or that kind of stuff, would fall into your land. Labor, the big part of the labor bucket, is we have unpaid labor, paid labor goes into that. And then any of your costs to have any of your staff, like your housing, that kind of stuff, will fall into your labor category. Machinery and equipment's a big category for us. It captures all your machinery and equipment costs. We do capture depreciation cost in that one too. And we also have some supplies that fall under that. Any supplies that's used across multiple enterprises, we just roll into that bucket. And then other, it captures any other fees that didn't fit in that category will fall into your other, like interest paid on loans, courses for development of employees, all that kind of stuff will fall into other. and we add each of those up as an individual category. And that gives us a quick look to see like this category is too high or this category is okay.
So, continuing on the overhead costs, what are some steps you take to help ranchers do better with accounting for these?
So we create what we call a profit and loss budget. And a profit and loss budget for us includes a trading account, a gross margin worksheet, an overhead worksheet, and then it'll complete the P&L. But once we get into the overhead costs, we have a ratio that you can run, and we watch the trend year after year on your overhead cost. We want it to be trending down. If it's trending up, then we know our overhead costs are getting too high, and we can go in and look at our worksheet and figure out where it's getting too high. Usually in the machinery and equipment side of it.
And are these all templates that you offer in your courses?
Yes, once you take one of our courses, they're loaded into what we call the LMS, Learning Management System. You can download them and you start working them through their spreadsheet type system.
Okay, yeah, because I just think about it from a perspective of maybe people are kind of starting from scratch, or it might just be easier to start from scratch and move forward with where they're at, and that can be a little overwhelming, and sometimes templates make all the difference.
Yes, and that's what we want them to do. We want them to look forward. We can't fix what happened behind us, but we want to start managing going forward. So we're predicting everything out to give ourselves an opportunity to make changes. I mean, we predict out our costs in a year in advance. We can make changes before it actually happens.
So let's talk a little more about the direct costs. And you also talked about feed and hay within this bucket. So define direct cost, or how you define it in your courses.
So we define direct costs as costs that change as units of production changes. So every time you increase an animal unit, you increase one of those, your costs will go up. Examples is like your feed cost, your vet med cost. You could even have some marketing cost in that. But any cost that changes as you raise your units is a cost that we'll use as a direct cost.
So, what is the main mistake ranchers make when accounting for, or maybe not accounting for, these direct costs?
So they usually do account for all the direct costs, but what we see is they don't charge that enterprise a true value for it. And hay is a good example. So a lot of cow-calf producers, they produce their own hay, but they don't charge that cow-calf enterprise the actual value of it. They just charge what it costs of production. So like what we asked, round bells is about $75 a bell around southern Oklahoma. So we asked them to charge the cow-calf enterprise $75 a bell to make sure it's profitable. Traditionally, a lot of people just roll that hay cost, all that machinery equipment up into the cow-calf enterprise, so they don't know if it's even costing them money. If we break it out into its own enterprise, so we have a cow-calf enterprise and we have a hay enterprise, that gives us an opportunity to see if it's cheaper to go buy hay, if it's still reasonable to produce it on our own property, and then we sell that to the enterprise that's going to use it at fair market value.
Would you say it's really dependent on if it's cheaper to buy hay versus put it up, or is there more of a trend towards producers just finding that it is, in general, better to just buy hay instead of put it up themselves?
We're seeing a trend to buy hay, especially in the regenerative, the way we are regenerative. We'd rather graze it and use it for something else than to mine the forage off of it and hay. And we're learning a lot. I mean, we're learning that we can leave it as standing forage in the winter and graze it cheaper than we can put it in bale and get the same graze out of it.
So why do you think some of these mistakes are missed or so often made when people are not accounting for them, or maybe not planning for the profit like they should be?
It's the way we've always done it. It's the way our grandpa done it. It's the way our great grandpa done it. And we just keep continuing to do the same things because that was the way we were taught. And we can see that change does help if it's the right change.
Still staying on those direct costs, how can ranchers get a better grasp on these and improve their accounting?
So in that P&L budget that we were talking about, we have the gross margin worksheet. Your gross margin is your direct cost. So we have a ratio that we can calculate, and we want it to trend up. We want our ratio percentage to be getting better. If it trends down, then our direct costs are getting too high. And there's ways that we can manage direct costs. I mean, sometimes it's better to maybe sell some animals and lower that cost. One thing that caught me off guard is I grew up in the time where we chased weaning weights and we chased high numbers of livestock. And we have found that we can manage forage and we can maybe lower the number of animals we have, or even our weaning weights might slip, but we can still be more profitable because it's not costing us as much money to get there.
So that's a mindset shift in and of itself. What are some other big shifts you see with producers once they take the time to dive into their operations and maybe accept that they weren't truly profitable and need to make some changes?
Yeah, we see a lot of times breaking those out into individual enterprises, like your cow calf is one, your hay enterprise is one, even if you're chopping silage would be one. And we ask that each of those be profitable. So it gives us an opportunity to analyze them to see if we even need to be doing it. What we've seen with a lot of people coming in, if they're using that and feeding it on the farm, they just roll it underneath the cow calf enterprise, and they don't truly understand if it's worth doing it or not doing it. And that can vary for year to year. I mean, one year it might be cheaper for you to chop silage, and the next year you might be able to buy it. I mean, sometimes that stuff varies. Same with hay cost.
So, Patrick, we've talked about planning for a profit, overhead costs, and direct costs, and you shared them at a high level because I know you and I spoke off the recording, and you said that, and it's pretty clear that you can go into a lot of deep conversation about each one of those buckets, along with a lot of other factors that impact profitability. But I know you guys, and we don't have time for that on the podcast today, but I know you guys do that in some of your courses, and we briefly touched on those a little bit. But do you want to talk about what some of those courses are and what they entail so producers are aware of what resources are out there to help them dive into these topics at a deeper level?
Yeah, so the first course we can talk about is the Noble Profitability Essentials. It was our first profitability course that we rolled out. It goes into details of all the stuff that we were discussing. We start at planning for a profit, and we work all the way through a cash flow budget. And we show you how to use the ratios and how to analyze it, see if our direct costs are too high, or if our overheads are too high, or maybe we're meeting the goal that we want and we can stay consistent. And then we move into the cash flow budget to make sure that we can still cash flow, and we do that ahead of time, just at the same budgeting periods that we do the P&L, to make sure that they're cash flowing. And if we have issues in the cash flow, we can fix those in advance too.
So that's one course. And how many days is that?
The Noble Profitability course is a 2-day course. It was built in partnership with Ranch Management Consultants. So RFP, people is familiar with RFP. It's built on the same principles.
And do you travel to different states for those, or do people have to come down to Oklahoma? What does that look like?
We are traveling. We're reaching out. We've been to California. There's one going to Oregon, Wisconsin. We do some in Oklahoma. Kansas, we're going to Kansas City next month. So we're starting to branch out and start to travel.
Okay. And what other courses do you want to maybe just touch on or bring up? Because I know you guys have a few of them.
So we got Noble Land Essentials. It's more on the soils and monitoring your land and the 6 soil health principles. It's a really, really good course to get people going and understanding what the soil's telling you, what your forage is telling you. It's a very good course to get started.
Well, and I believe you have, since we're on the resource topic, I know there's some for free on the website as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, Noble Land Essentials is on there. Noble Land Essentials is online, and then we have another course that we've done in partnership that is free.
All right. Well, Patrick, as we kind of wrap up the conversation today, how I kind of like to end it with my guests is to really, for you to reflect back on your first 5 years in the beef industry and share what you would do differently if you could go back and do that again.
Yeah, the first 5 years, I'm a fifth generation rancher in Oklahoma. But the first 5 years, if I could change anything, I would change the way I look at forage. I didn't understand it. And now that I know that if I graze my cattle right and I understand how forage is, I can really cut direct costs. And I never understood that. I was the guy chasing numbers and chasing pounds. And it's really changed the way I've looked at it.
All right. Well, Patrick, thank you for taking the time today to give that high-level overview of how to best plan for a profit and manage overhead costs and direct costs, and even share some of the resources that ranchers can look into or be a part of if they want to take steps to be more profitable as a rancher.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks. So I will include some links to what Patrick and I talked about down in the show notes and in the description. And if you go down there after every podcast episode, you will always find some resources that will help you as a rancher. Remember, the best way to support this podcast and your favorite podcasts is to leave a rating or review, and of course, share it with a friend who would also find this information valuable. Happy ranching, folks.